evening and welcome. It's time once again for CU Immigration here on WRFU LP Urbana, 104.5 FM. I will be your host for this evening. My name is Mr. Garza, and I'm here to let you know that WRFU is an open forum for the Urbana-Champaign community. Views expressed are those of the speakers, in this case myself, and not intended to represent WRFU or UCIMC or, as we like to say on the televised version of this show, UPTV. These views are our own, and by our in this instance I mean myself and the opinions of various people whose writing I may happen to be reading. Their opinions are theirs, my opinions are mine, your opinions are yours, and that's how it is. So blame me if you don't like it or something. Anyway, I'm back again in my undisclosed location here, as I always am at this time. And I have more stories and things about immigration. So my first one is entitled Immigrant Dreamers in Search of a Job Are Being Turned Away. And these are people who are at least currently legal to work. They have work permits. They have everything they need except the confidence of employers that they're going to retain those rights given the current administration. So let us read on here. Natalie dressed in a sports coat and slacks, David Rodriguez took a seat in the front row to hear a presentation about an internship opportunity at Procter & Gamble, the consumer giant. What he heard excited him, and Mr. Rodriguez, a Venezuelan immigrant who was studying business at Florida International University. The company valued diversity. It aimed to hire interns as full-time employees after they graduated. But when he applied, one question on the form stumped him. Are you currently a U.S. citizen or national, or an alien lawfully admitted for permanent residence, or a refugee, or an individual granted asylum? He was none of these things. He informed the company that he was a beneficiary of the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program, or DACA, under which he and thousands of other young immigrants have permission to work legally in the country. Before his qualifications were even considered, he received a rejection letter. It was like a punch in the stomach, Mr. Rodriguez, who is now 37, said of the experience in 2013, that undermined everything he understood about his status in the United States. He is now a plaintiff in a lawsuit that seeks to use civil rights law to prevent employers from turning away immigrants like himself, a legal fight that is underway even as President Trump is threatening to end the program. Since its introduction by the Obama administration in 2012, DACA has enrolled some 800,000 undocumented immigrants, often called dreamers, who were brought to the country illegally as children. Many have gone on to graduate from college and build successful lives under the program, which has bipartisan support in Congress. Yet while the courts have accepted DACA's legality and have blocked the recent attempts to abruptly cancel it, some of the country's biggest companies are unilaterally refusing to hire dreamers. Since Mr. Trump stepped up his attacks on the program, the employment roadblocks have become even more prevalent. These employers, including Procter & Gamble, say they are wary of investing time and money to train workers whose long-term employment eligibility is not secure. Other firms want to avoid getting ensnared in the nation's contentious immigration debate. On the one hand, employers are trying to hire the best talent available to stay afloat and recover from COVID-19, while on the other hand, they are worried about investing the time and resources to train someone who could get deported, said Woody Hunt, the co-chair of the American Business Immigration Coalition, a group that promotes a legislative solution to legalize dreamers. It is impossible to know how many people have been denied jobs based on their DACA status, said Thomas A. Saenz, President and General Counsel of the Mexican-American Legal Defense and Education Fund, which has filed several lawsuits against companies that refuse to hire DACA recipients. Bank of America and Northwestern Mutual are among those who have settled such employment cases. M&T Bank and Procter & Gamble are defendants in current lawsuits. If major companies are engaging in this practice, countless smaller companies are doing the same thing, Mr. Sant said. Concern about hiring DACA recipients has intensified since the Trump administration announced in September 2017 that it would dismantle the program, throwing its survival into doubt, even as courts forced the government to keep it in place. Employers come to me saying, I would love to hire this person, but my worry is that if I hire them, invest 3 or 4 months in training them, and if Trump does away with the program, then I have to hire and train a new person. That gets expensive and time-consuming, said Dagmar Boot, an immigration lawyer in Portland, Oregon. I tell them, if you really like this person, this program is not dead yet, so you shouldn't assume that they will be unable to continue working for you. But if your reason for not hiring the person is a business reason, then that is a decision for you to make, Ms. Boot said. Some employers say the advantages of hiring DACA recipients outweigh the risks. Alivio Medical Center, located in an immigrant enclave of Chicago, employs doctors, nurse practitioners, and physician assistants who have employment eligibility through DACA, aware that they are potentially deportable, said Esther Corpuz, its chief executive. She said their life experiences as immigrants in diverse cultural backgrounds are assets. These providers really are able in a professional and empathetic way to treat our patients, she said. David McNeil, who built an automotive accessories empire, WeatherTech, in Bolingbrook, Illinois, said some of its very best employees are DACA recipients. U.S. educated and bilingual, they help us sell American-made goods all over the world. We couldn't support our export customers without them, said Mr. McNeil, a Trump supporter who said he would not consider terminating an employee who was a legal work permit simply because they might not be able to continue to work for you. That came close to happening to Ismael Hernandez. He graduated from DePaul University in Chicago with an accounting degree in 2013, a year after DACA was introduced. It felt like I could open a window and feel a cool breeze for the first time. I could breathe, recalled Mr. Hernandez, 29, who was brought to the United States from Mexico when he was 5 months old. He amassed the necessary documents and plunked down $465 to apply for the program, renewing every 2 years. Thanks to DACA, he was eligible to be hired at a top accounting firm. A few years later, he took a position in the tax department of a well-known internet company, also in Chicago. But when the Trump administration announced it would wind down the program, Mr. Hernandez was summoned for a meeting. I had a gut feeling that it was about DACA, he recalled. Across the table, a human resources officer and 2 company lawyers explained that they would have to discuss a contingency plan for his job in view of the administration's move to end the program, and that they must tell Mr. Hernandez's manager about his precarious status. The next day, the situation got worse. We don't know if you'll be able to stay in the country, Mr. Hernandez said he was told. We need to think of the company. We want to post the job. Fighting back tears, Mr. Hernandez urged them to wait until his DACA status expired the following year before taking any action. Ultimately, they agreed. In the meantime, Mr. Hernandez married an American and received a green card. He has since changed jobs. The first DACA employment lawsuit in 2014 was filed in federal court in New York against the financial company Northwestern Mutual on behalf of Ruben Juarez, a college graduate and immigrant from Mexico. In late 2013, a recruiter had expressed enthusiasm for hiring him, but after he presented his work permit, Mr. Juarez was asked whether he was a U.S. citizen or green card holder, according to court documents. Mr. Juarez said he had employment authorization through DACA and was told that non-citizens needed a green card to be hired. The parties settled out of court in 2015, and as part of its terms, the company began a program aimed at recruiting immigrants, including DACA recipients. In Miami, Mr. Rodriguez never imagined that he would end up being part of a class action lawsuit against the maker of iconic brands like Pampers, Tide, and Crest. He still remembers the day he received his employment authorization card in December 2012. "It felt like I had just unwrapped a chocolate bar with a golden ticket," he said of the card, the size of a driver's license that is tucked in his wallet. Having worked for years at restaurants and bars, he could put his higher education to use and fulfill his professional aspirations. After he was rejected for the internship at Procter & Gamble, he sought clarification from the company's recruiter. Unfortunately, per P&G policy, applicants in the U.S. should be legally authorized to work with no restraints on the type, duration, or location of employment. The recruiter emailed back adding, "If your status in the future were to change to no restrictions, please shoot me a note." The case, which is now pending in Miami federal court, turns on language in the Civil Rights Act of 1866 that prohibits alienage discrimination, or discrimination because a person is not a citizen of the United States. The complaint asserts that Procter & Gamble's policy constituted unlawful discrimination. The company's lawyers argued that the decision not to hire Mr. Rodriguez was based strictly on his immigration status, an issue that is commonly a subject of employment decisions. It said the rejection was not unlawful because it was not synonymous with alienage discrimination. In June, a federal judge denied a motion for summary judgment and decided that the case should proceed to trial, deeming the policy to be facially discriminatory and in violation of the civil rights law. The company is seeking to appeal the summary judgment ruling. Procter & Gamble said the company believed it had acted legally and would continue to defend the case in court. "For perspective, we hire people with the expectation of a long-term career," the company said in a statement. "So our recruitment systems focus on people with long-term work authorization in the U.S." It said the company's application process had been modified to allow for greater flexibility since the lawsuit was filed. The company has and will continue to consider individuals authorized to work under DACA for employment opportunities at P&G. It did not say whether any DACA recipients had been hired under its revised policy. His hopes of working at Procter & Gamble dashed, Mr. Rodriguez decided to pivot to real estate, a booming sector in Miami. He extended his studies at Florida International University, graduating summa cum laude in 2017 with a major in business administration and a concentration in real estate and finance. He currently works at Lincoln Property, one of the country's largest real estate management companies. In Miami, one of the most diverse cities in the country with a booming population of Spanish-speaking immigrants, Mr. Rodriguez himself is a hot property. So, I guess I should say we all know the DACA program is flawed. It exists only because it has not been possible to push any kind of legislative fix for these people through Congress. It just hasn't. There's always somebody who's holding it up or doing something and making it impossible to get it through. They've tried it several times. They got it through the Senate, and then the House at the time was a hotbed of right-wing Tea Party types, and they wouldn't even take up the legislation. So it's been tried multiple times to come up with a legislative fix for this, and each time it has fallen short. So the DACA program was just a stopgap to help them out. And it was never intended to be a permanent fix, and it shouldn't be looked at as a permanent fix. But at the same time, it needs to be supported because at the moment it's all these people have. And by these people, I mean people who were brought here as kids, dreamers, as they have been called, through no fault. I mean, they had nothing to do with the process of getting here. These are not your classic illegal immigrants who, cross the border and or sneaking around and whatever the stereotypical notion of undocumented people is. These are kids who just like, hey, guess what? We're going to America. Whether you like it or not, here you are, and you're raised here ever since you were a kid. This is your home. This is the home that you know. It is, for many of them, the only home that they know. For some of them, it's their main home. But for a lot of them, a huge number that I've spoken to anyway, this is where they grew up. This is like, childhood. Everything that I grew up with, they grew up with. And there is absolutely no rational excuse for excluding them from citizenship, other than, using citizenship and immigrants generally as a cudgel and as a divisive topic for, I'm not, anyway, everything keeps, here's my problem at the moment. Everything here keeps circling back one way or another to politics and to political parties and to which parties are doing what related to immigration. No matter which angle I come at immigration from, I always end up in some way circling back to politics and getting into that fraught territory of saying, hey, these guys are doing bad things and these guys are doing good things, relatively speaking. I don't want to come here week after week and say, oh, vote for this or vote against that, because this topic is about people, and it should be about people. And I would love to do this show about people and the different kinds of situations they find themselves in, the difficulties they have, all that kind of thing. And yet again and again and again, I end up having to talk about politics and specifically about elections. We have an election coming up in a couple of months, and it is really important that you get out there and vote. Really, really important. This is, I'm old, and this is the most important consequential election of my lifetime, far and away, beyond any other. And so, unfortunately, I'm going to just have to keep coming back to this. I'm just going to keep circling around to politics and keep ending up saying, you know why this situation exists. You know why this problem exists. You know why these people are being targeted. It's for electoral, it's for political dominance. It's for political division. It's for coming up with a scapegoat. Big corporations are sending your jobs overseas and paying you less for your work. Well, you got to blame that on somebody, and they don't want to sit there and say, oh, it's my decision that we've decided we're not going to support the people that got us here. The workers that have been with us for years and years and who've been here and made this company what it is. We'd like to save a few bucks. We'd like to make more money for our CEO. So we're going to send all this work overseas. We're going to fire all you people. And who are we going to blame? Oh, it's immigrants coming here taking your jobs. It's like clockwork over and over throughout the history of this country. Who are you going to blame? Immigrants. Who are you going to blame? Foreigners. Anyway, you'd think people would understand these things, would read some history, would know this stuff. Apparently not. Okay, moving on. Here's this article is entitled "Immigration to New York City Declines, Amplifying Economic Concerns." Big surprise. New York City's economy depends on immigrants, but at a time when it needs all the help it can get, the flow of new residents from overseas is slowing. Immigration to New York City dropped 45% between 2016 and 2019, with about 34,000 immigrants moving to the city last year compared with 62,000 in 2016. according to an analysis of U.S. Census Bureau population estimates by William Frey, senior fellow at the Brookings Institution. City officials and immigration advocates say tighter federal immigration policies and delays in processing visa applications during the pandemic have reduced the flow of transplants. Immigrants make up about 45% of the local workforce and own more than half of the city's businesses, according to a 2019 report by the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs. Quote, I am worried that declining rates of international immigration will hurt not only future economic growth in New York City, but the stability of New York City's tax base, said Michael Hendricks, Director of State and Local Policy at the Manhattan Institute, a conservative think tank. Immigration has traditionally offset the departure of New York City residents to other parts of the U.S., according to Frank Donnelly, a geospatial data librarian at Baruch College. The recent slowdown in arrivals from other countries, however, contributed to an overall drop in the city's population the last 3 years. Historically, immigration nationwide tended to be weaker when the economy faltered, including after the 2000 dot-com bubble and 2008 recession, said Mr. Donnelly, who studies census data. From 2017 through 2019, however, the economy was very strong, but foreign migration was very weak, the weakest level in the past 20 years, he said. Bita Mostofi, commissioner of the Mayor's Office of Immigration Affairs, said immigration is essential to the city's economic development. We are very much a city of immigrants, she said. You cannot look at the history of our city and not see the impact and footprint that immigrants have had on building our companies, our infrastructure, our small businesses, and the culture of who we are. President Trump has restricted legal and illegal immigration since taking office, including banning travel from several Muslim-majority countries, reducing the number of refugees allowed to enter the country, and imposing a public charge rule that critics say will prevent immigrants from poor countries from moving to the U.S. Immigration has further slowed during the pandemic, with countries introducing travel restrictions and many consulates temporarily closing, delaying the processing of visa application. Yankee Chering, that's an interesting name, Yankee Chering, executive director of the Business Center for New Americans, a nonprofit that provides small business loans and financial guidance to immigrants and refugees, said she has heard from friends and family overseas that the response to the pandemic in the U.S. has dissuaded some people from moving here. Oh, really? You mean hundreds of thousands of people dying and getting sick? Yeah. Technical difficulties all over the place here. Hopefully my editing will be so smooth that you will not be aware of what's going on. But I have a dying video card and it like shuts down the computer. It just shuts off every now and then. And it shuts everything that I'm doing and I have to restart. And this is like the third time now that I've had to restart since I began. So I apologize if the editing seems choppy and weird and all of that, but it is. And I'm discombobulated all over the place because I don't know what's going on. So anyway, let me back up here. Oh, we were talking about the response to the pandemic has dissuaded people from moving here. For sure. I'm working on a project with a friend in Japan, and talking about the pandemic and what's going on in the U.S. is a steady topic of our conversations, and most of what I hear is baffled surprise and just, I don't understand what you're doing over there. And honestly, I can't defend it because I don't understand what we're doing over here either. I mean, I understand what local people are doing here and there. I know what people are doing here in town, and I understand the decisions they make, but federally speaking, the federal government, it's just beyond me. It makes no sense at all. And it isn't even, it obviously isn't working, and I don't know why anyone would think that it is. Anyway, back to our story. What attracted many people who came to the U.S. is the business environment. It's much more flexible. It's easier to set up a business, Ms. Cherian said. But now, maybe it's better to go to some of these other countries where maybe you're not going to appear on Shark Tank and make millions of dollars, but there's a better quality of life. There's a safety net, she said, referring to a popular business reality show. Muzaffar Chisti, director of the New York office of the Migration Policy Institute, predicts affordability will have a bigger long-term impact on immigration than the pandemic. Throughout New York's history, certainly in the last 120 years, immigrants have shown that they have much more faith in the resilience of the city than native-born people have, he said. But middle-class immigrants are looking at options more than they used to because of the heavy cost of living, mostly due to rent. Immigration has helped the city recover from previous disasters. After New York City lost more than 1 million net residents during the 1970s financial crisis, immigrants were a driving force behind the city's population recovery over the next 2 decades, according to the New York City Department of City Planning. The population of illegal immigrants in New York dropped 25% between 2008 and 2018, according to the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs. The office attributes the decline to the U.S.'s slow recovery from the 2008 recession, an improving Mexican economy, and increased enforcement along the border. Armando Villanueva moved to New York City in the early 1990s from the Mexican state of Puebla. Poverty was increasing in his hometown, and at age 20, Mr. Villanueva entered the U.S. illegally and moved in with his uncle in Queens. He worked in different low-wage jobs for years before eventually becoming an auto mechanic, and now lives in Staten Island with his wife and 3 children, aged 9, 13, and 20. His oldest son is studying biology at the City College of New York. Mr. Villanueva said that for a long time, so many people from his hometown in Mexico were moving to the city that they referred to it as Puebla, York. Over the past 2 years, he has noticed fewer people arriving. He believes a big reason is that the immigrants who moved here between 1985 and 2000 are sending money home. Now the young people have the resources to attend schools in Mexico, Mr. Villanueva said, adding that he sends money to support his sister and nieces. That's the case for many other people, and probably that's why we don't see more people coming over. So New York City is struggling right now, in part, obviously partly because of the pandemic, and partly because of immigration. And there are so many small towns. It's weird. If you drive through the Midwest here, you'll see all sorts of small, once farming communities that just don't have any kind of businesses anymore. There are residents there. There are people that live there, but they don't shop locally in town. They drive somewhere, go to some big box store. There may be a gas station that's also a convenience store kind of thing in town for those little quick, you just want to pick up something. But for the most part, there's nothing there.